Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about top 10 4 drops. These are the best 4 drops basically ever. So, yeah, this one was a really tough list to make. Hard to sort of figure out like what was good. I mean, because there's not a lot of overlap between these, and some were really good in some eras and not so much anymore. So it was very difficult to sort of it was more subjective, a lot more subjective, and a lot less clear cut. It wasn't like, oh yeah, Psychotog is like the best creature ever, and it super dominated everything. Obviously, it's a lot worse now. Certainly not the best creature ever, but certainly the most dominant in a lot of aspects. There wasn't anything that obvious here. So it took a lot of thought. This one was really tough. Probably the one I spent the most time on. There's some really powerful cards, but it's like they would only be good in one archetype or one format, or only for a couple years and whatever. So it was tough. It was tough, but that's okay. Let's just get started. All right, we got some honorable mentions here. We got Tradewind Rider. It was good back in the day in Old Standard. This card was pretty fun to play with. It was good with like the 5-color green decks back in the day. It was good with the Survival of the Fittest decks. And of course, it was also in the Legacy Survival decks, AATS, Angry Tradewind Survival. So you basically be like having anger and Quirion Ranger, and you return multiple things. That was pretty sweet. Now we got Lodestone Golem. So yeah, this card was basically just mostly just a vintage only kind of thing. It sees some play, a little bit of play in Legacy, but mostly a vintage card just because of how trivially easy it is to drop this guy into play on turn one off like a Workshop and a Mox or whatnot, or Ancient Tomb and Mana Vault or all sorts of things. So this card is very strong. Obviously, it was strong enough to get restricted because there's a pretty crazy clock. Pretty crazy clock. Then we got Arc-Light Phoenix, where it's really big and modern, of course. And it's seen a little bit of play in Legacy and a little bit of play in Standard, but mostly just a modern thing. Very strong. This card is sweet, pretty fun to play. It's nice that they're making phoenixes that are good, like this guy or Rekindling Phoenix. That's pretty sweet. So yeah, he definitely gets an honorable mention. Could even be on the list at some point. Who knows? Lots of synergy with spamming cheap spells, and that's what a lot of stuff is in the older formats. Um, okay, now we got Siege Rhino. This card's about the best thing you can be doing for 4 mana. I mean, it's just so much value. 4 mana, 4/5, got trample, lightning helix on ETB, and that's everyone. So like great in Commander when you can blink it and stuff, really sweet. It's a Rhino, which is cool. I like this card a lot. It was really fun to play. I really liked reanimating it and blinking it, and I don't know, just casting it. So it's really strong, really strong. Um, and now we have Solemn Simulacrum. Solemn Simulacrum's one of the most played creatures in Commander. It's very good in Standard. It just does everything you want to do. It's a good blocker because it dies, you card pop, and then also it has um, the rampant growth effect, So really sweet stuff. Um, and it's super fun to blink, super fun to reanimate. Uh, it's cool. I love it. So it also kind of stands in for like a lot of different stuff, like Oracle of Moldiah. I really like that in Commander. I don't think it's seen a ton of play elsewhere, but it's pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. All right, so let's get to the list. All right, number 10, one of the former best creatures ever with Mastcore. This card is awesome, and it does a lot of good stuff. I mean, first off, 4 mana for 4/4, good stats, and you have to discard beginning of your upkeep. So oftentimes that was just sometimes you just discard a squee and get the squee back, so that would pay for it every turn. Sometimes you just be like, whatever, it's okay. This is the best thing I can be doing. You don't really care about any other cards, so you just discard every turn, core lock yourself. And then, of course, the two abilities of regenerating it, which is really great. So against most damage-based removal, that's awesome. Against blockers, that's awesome. So anything smaller, though, it can do 1 damage to it. So that's pretty... Oh my gosh. I sneezed. Oh, must have been someone talking about me. Okay. But yeah, so you can do 1 damage to smaller dudes, or you can block bigger dudes and pay 2 to regenerate it to kill it. I mean, it just does everything. Obviously, not that good anymore. It was sweet back in the day in like a lot of the old Tinker lists, any of the old Ancient Tomb decks, Metalworker decks, that kind of stuff. Because those decks didn't really have a good way to kill like weenies and stuff, and Mastercore was your trump card against those kind of decks. And that's pretty sweet. So this card obviously very, very good with lots and lots of mana. You know, tapping your 2 Thran Dynamos to wipe their board or something. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Not as good anymore, but was very, very powerful back in the day. So I think it deserves its spot at number 10. Probably won't be on this list for much longer, though. I'd imagine at some point we'll just get better and stronger 4-drops. So rest in peace, Mastercore. Sweet, sweet prince. Alright, so let's go to number 9. So this guy is pretty strong. I wasn't sure whether I should put like Sower of Temptation here or Mistbind Click. Mistbind Click was obviously a lot stronger in the Fairies deck and Standard because it was so good against control decks, and it was really good against saving your dudes against removal. And it was like this or being cryptic. What's past tense of cryptic command? Well, anyways, and that was so it put your opponent in a really bad situation because it's like, oh, are you going to cryptic them or are you going to Mistbind Click them? And it's kind of like a lose-lose scenario. So it was pretty brutal playing against it. But it was really fun card. Obviously very good in Standard at the time. The Fairies deck dominated that Standard season. Very good in Extended and even Modern for a time, which got Bitter Blossom banned, really. So yeah, pretty strong card. Obviously I like Sower a lot more in Commander. I think it's better. Being able to control magic stuff and having a flying beater is really sweet too. So I don't know, but I love all the fairy stuff. I love fairies cards. Like I said, Cloud of Fairy, one of my favorite fairies. I really wish they would have reprinted Cloud of Fairies. The card is so sweet. Man, that's okay though. That's okay. Maybe one of these days we'll get Cloud of Fairies. Maybe not, but they better. So yeah, this is number 9. Pretty strong, pretty sweet, pretty brutal. So I think it's okay at number 9. But what's number 8? Obviously, it's the one card that could easily kill Cloud of Fairies, Mistbind Click, and it's Flametongue Kavu, and that's exactly what this card did. Or at least in its day in Standard, it nuked a lot of Blinding Angels. I mean a lot. And so a lot of those cards, those 4 toughness, cards, just became unplayable for the most part because this guy is just so brutal against it. Especially like from the Fire stack where this guy had haste. You just like nuke their guy, bash for 4 is pretty insane value. And this was even better back in the day because Red really lacked a good way to deal with like 4 toughness stuff other than spending multiple burn spells on it, which was just horrible, right? That was not fun. So yeah, this card is really good, and it was really good and Extended too at the time. A lot of times it was played main deck or sideboard. For example, the Goblins deck in Extended oftentimes would sideboard a couple Flametongue Kavus to deal with bigger dudes if they were mono red, because it's just an easy way to deal with that kind of crap. Yeah, so even though it obviously wasn't a goblin, it was just so strong. It was just so easy to run it and just deal with stuff and not have to deal with it. And having a 4 power dude is pretty strong. Of course, and I love this guy in Commander. He's really sweet. Comes into play, blast stuff for 4. You can blink it. That's pretty sweet. You can do all sorts of fun stuff with this guy. The art is sweet. Look at him blasting that thing. Yeah, this card is great. So it's really nice to be able to have a red card that deals with like these 4 toughness things, which can often be pretty big pain in the butt. Pretty big pain in the butt. So yeah, not as great today, unfortunately. Although if it was in like modern, again, it might see a little bit of play, but that's okay. We still love it. We still love it. I want print this guy so I can play him in Jund. Gosh dang it. All right. So this is number 8. What's number 7? Yeah, but you didn't think about that, dummies. Well, I'm Galaxy Brain tier, right? So this guy, I didn't actually think about until very recently. I think like yesterday, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a 4 mana guy, and he's just so strong, especially back in the day where you're getting like free Grizzly Bears, which was pretty rough against a lot of decks, like having that many free blockers or just threats or whatever. And of course, it itself was an artifact too, of course, and so it fueled all the affinity stuff, like all the cranial plating shenanigans. Helped cast your mirror enforcers and stuff on turn 3 for free or for very little. So yeah, this card was really good, and it was great. And it loved to carry cranial platings and all sorts of things like that because it's awesome. Yeah, this card is real sweet. It does everything you want. Obviously, hasn't seen any play recently. I don't remember the Experimental Frenzy decks, the Experimental Frenzy affinity list, if they play this or not, but this card is sweet. Saw a lot of play in Standard and Extended and Modern, of course, although like I said, not anymore really, but is pretty ubiquitous, pretty powerful, and one of the most powerful Standard decks ever. I mean, yeah, the Ravager affinity decks were just silly. So yeah, this card did pretty much what you really wanted to do, which was, you could put counters on it from Ravager, and just having all these free 2/2s, like sometimes like on the first turn and stuff, like double Frogmite. Oof, that was tough to deal with. But it was sweet though. It was sweet, super fun, and look at it. I think it's actually a frog too. I think it's an artifact creature frog. Oof, good stuff. Anyways, that's number 7. So what's number 6? It's this guy. It's Goblin Ringleader. And he's awesome. Why is he on the list and not all the other Goblin cards on like the 3 mana ones? Well, I think Ringleader is just a lot better in as much that it's the reason why the Goblin deck is able to grind so well. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Whereas like stuff like Chieftain and Matron and stuff are really strong, but I think they're just weaker than a lot of the other cards at 3 mana. Whereas Ringleader, I think, is just that much better, that much stronger. And now we have it just reprinted in the most recent core set, so we can actually play this guy in Modern now too, in the Modern Goblins deck, which is great. And that should be really fun, really sweet. Obviously, you have everything but like Lackey and Recruiter, and then of course Waste and Port too. But so you can really grind it out with this dude, which is sweet, which is really fun, and it's enables the kind of tribal goblin strategy that people like. Not really like the 8 whack. Like 8 whack is stupid. No one actually likes 8 whack. And I saw a lot of excitement for this card, obviously. So people really wanted Modern Horizons, and I was like, oh, they just missed out. They should have printed this in Modern Horizons, but obviously they're printing it in the core set, where it's like, yeah, this is great. This is sweet. Yeah, it shapes the way you build your Goblin decks. You really want like 30 power, 30 dudes, 30 goblins in total. So you can hit on average about 2 for every ringleader. So that's pretty sweet. So it's strong enough to shape the way you change your deck. And even though this guy has haste, this actually makes it really good because it's not really redundant with like War Chief, because a lot of times you're slamming this dude after like a Wrath, and like bam, get in for 2, reveal some dudes. Oh, just so sweet. Everyone likes this kind of thing because it's more interesting, more cerebral, more big brained, a lot more difficult to play, but it's really fun. Everyone likes the mid-rangey, combo-y sort of style of Goblins decks, that's what everyone wants to play. And it's sweet. And this card is very, very strong, even though it's obviously only good in one deck. Um, but it's good enough to shape the way that deck is played, good enough to be played in multiple different formats throughout basically the entire time you've been able to play all the goblins cards together, basically since Scourge. So stood the test of time pretty well, pretty well. And so I think that easily earns its place as number 6. Also, it's just a silly card. I mean, come on, this thing is like, was you 4 dudes for this? That's nuts. All right, so let's look at number 5. All right, so this card is kind of like a Goblin Ringleader for your decks that want to play spells. Yeah, so Blood Raid is great because it gets you just, even though it's just a random spell, you get so many cool cards. You know, obviously in Standard you got stuff like Blightning, things like that. And in Modern, of course, you can get like Goyfs and Bolts and all sorts of things. Tireless Trackers, Scavenging Ooze, so many good cards. Just getting the Thoughtseize is pretty solid. Like this is a really sweet card, and it has haste, which is great because it's excellent for dealing with planeswalkers. So very nice for dealing with planeswalkers. Um, Gets in there for damage. This card's great after a wrath or a bunch of removal. Helps you grind. It's such a sweet card, such a fun deck. You know, Jund. And this card's seen play in Standard and Extended at the time, and then Modern, and then even a little bit of Legacy play at the moment. There's like a rug colored deck that plays this guy, and like Crashing Footfalls and Ancestral Vision and stuff. So getting like free Ancestrals and 2/4/4 Rhinos and stuff, like that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So yeah, I love this card. It's really fun. Probably should have chosen the other art from like Eternal Masters, so that's a lot better. This one is actually really bad and ugly. I always liked the original art, but I think it was a mistake this time. Yeah, so this card does a lot. It's probably just the most generically kind of powerful card in this list, where a lot of the other cards are more specialized. This guy's seen play in a lot of different decks. And he's great. I love it. I love haste. Haste is a very powerful keyword. Getting free spells, I mean, shoot. What more do you want? So let's go to number 4. Okay, so another card that's not going to be casted fairly. Even something like Goblin Ringleader isn't really casted fairly, um, and or Frogmite for that matter, where you're just paying nothing for it. And that's kind of a theme with some of these cards, is that they're all being sort of cheated into play. You're not really casting them for their mana cost or whatnot. And Vengevine, you can hard cast it if you're really grinding super hard or whatever. But typically, you're getting it back for the alternate cost from the graveyard. I think this card saw a little bit of play in Standard, but obviously a lot of it is obviously seeing Modern play too occasionally in the Bridgevine decks. Um, and then also, of course, in Legacy, really, where it was ridiculous in the survival decks, which started out as just like a madness deck with survival and Vengevine. You'd pitch like 2 Root Wallas and get the Root Wallas into play from the survival and the madness cost, and then of course the Vengevines come back. Yeah, pretty silly, pretty silly. So that was really fun. Everyone liked that deck, and then of course it turned into like a it eschewed a lot of the survival, or excuse me, eschewed a lot of the madness cards to become a more combo control, well, mostly just a more combo sort of focused deck with some grindier elements, because it is still survival, so you can do all sorts of silly things. But yeah, this is a very explosive deck, still a pretty resilient deck, because even if they dealt with your Vengevines, you still had all these other, you know, random crap, and you had Disruption, and you had like Enlightened Tutor to find your survivals, yeah, Cabal Therapies, Thoughtseize, things like that. So yeah, it was a really good deck, really strong. So yeah, this guy takes a little bit of work, but he's pretty sweet, pretty sweet. I like him quite a bit. And of course he has haste too, so you get him in, and then he gets in, and that's a lot of damage. Like two Vengevines is like 8, and that's sweet, dude. Like, because you can do it so fast. Like on turn 3, bam, there's some big dudes, and you survival out even more, and oh my gosh, just going nuts, just going nuts. Or the Bridgevine decks which are about just as fast too, if not faster sometimes. So, yep, yep. So that's Vengevine, another really good card. What's number 3 though? Yeah, this guy's probably actually even better than Vengevine because it doesn't even take very much. You don't have to do too much at all. Just put a bunch of stuff in your graveyard. Just dredge. This card I've actually probably cast the least amount on this list. Like, I've hard casted Force of Will a few number of times, but I don't even think I've hard cast Ichrid more than like a handful of times ever. Yeah, that'd be a. I mean, I literally don't think I've cast him like more than a handful of times. That's crazy. So yeah, it's still a 4 mana card though. 3/1 with haste, which is really sweet. You get to exile all sorts of random crap from your graveyard. You know, extra Stinkweed Imps, extra Putrid Imps, things like that. Comes back and then dies at the end of turn. So he's good to sack to Dredge Return, good to sack to Therapy Flashbacks, and of course he dies. You get the Bridge tokens. So this card does everything. Very, very strong. And obviously sees a lot of play in Old Extended. Still sees lots of play in Legacy, and of course in Vintage, where it's kind of one of the boogeymen of the format, I guess, in a way. One of the pillars, the Bazaar Dredge decks. Yeah, it's pretty silly, pretty strong. Yeah, this card is sweet. It has that really nice arcade post art too, so that's awesome. That's awesome. You can't go wrong there. But let's go to number 2. Okay, so we got Academy Rector. Now this card was played in like a lot of old extended decks, like in the Pattern of Rebirth and Academy Rector decks, and you'd fetch out like a Phyrexian Ghoul, and then you start sacking stuff until you got like a 2020 Ghoul. It was played in like some of the Pandemonium Sapling Burst decks. There were survival decks that played it. There was the Enduring Renewal, Shield Sphere, Goblin Bombardment combo decks. It sees play in Legacy and Nick Fit and other decks. And I remember playing it in Vintage, where you would fetch out Yawgmoth's Bargain, of course, right around. I think it was right around when Scourge, when the Storm stuff came out. Yeah, because you just be like first turn Therapy, turn 2 Ritual out Academy Rector, Flashback Therapy, and get your Bargain into play, and then just go nuts. Yeah, that was really really sweet. I mean, that was a fun deck. So this card's seen a lot of play in a lot of different formats. Still sees a lot of play, and is pretty silly, pretty strong. Even if you don't have a sack outlet, it basically acts like a moat because they can't really attack into it if they're able to, if they're able to kill it, because obviously you just get your stupid dumb enchantment, either being a bargain or even something like Form of the Dragon or whatnot. Like there's all sorts of big dumb enchantments to get. So yeah, this card is pretty sweet, pretty fun, and that's pretty strong for an old lady. Look at her, man, and she's old. She kind of looks like my grandma. Anyways, so yeah, this card really really great. But the number 1 card, I think, is actually just a little bit better. And it was actually the card that I always thought would be probably the best 4-mana creature. Which, of course, is Thought-Knot Seer. Probably a card that doesn't need much introduction. It's great in big mana decks. It's great in just the Eldrazi decks, which are oftentimes big mana decks. So Tron decks will play this guy because he's, good against the combo decks. Obviously, Eldrazi itself plays it. Legacy, the Legacy Eldrazi decks will play it, the 12 post decks will play it, and Vintage, this card is played a ton. Like, it just does so much. It's so good with like the double mana lands. So you have obviously the Eldrazi themed ones with Eldrazi Temple and Eye of Ugin. With this guy, obviously broke modern, but in the older formats you have Ancient Tomb and City of Traders, of course, which, well, that's pretty good too. Even better because you can go turn 1 Chalice, turn 2 Thought Knot, and that's just so powerful. And unlike Click, which this card is actually kind of similar to, well, it's got a bigger butt, that's for sure, and 1 more power. But they, no Click, no Click's a random card too, kind of. But yeah, this one exiles it, so they can't even tutor it up again, which is kind of nice, unlike Click. And then just gives them a random card when it dies. But this card's a little bit harder to remove because it's so much bigger, you know. Yeah, pretty silly. And this card is basically like, it was so good in the modern because you'd go turn 1 Eye and then double Mimic, and then turn 2 Eldrazi Temple, Thought Knot Seer, and it's just like, oof. Yeah, that's them taking 8, that's you disrupting them, and that's just brutal. It's just so brutal. Yeah, that was one of the more degenerate modern decks, that's for sure. And it's, again, even better in older formats when you can ramp out Chalice turn 1 into this guy, or all sorts of ridiculous things. So yeah, Hillax was like, a lot of the big mana decks like to play him because he's a threat. So they don't have to ramp as hard, so they're able to disrupt the combo decks earlier, and also have a beater. So that's really good, really strong there. This card is kind of just the most universally strong and also the most ubiquitous. I mean, obviously Academy Rector is like stronger, more broken, but she's not seen in as many different decks. Basically, there are very specific decks that kind of require her. But I think Thought Knot's overall just the best for comparing like power, ubiquity, how good it was in all the different formats. It's sweet. You really I don't think you get much better than this guy. He was always the card I thought would be probably the best. You know, once I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, Thought Knot Seer. That's a 4 mana card, even though I'm casting it on turn 2 half the time. So yeah, this card is sweet. Look at it, he's got that giant eye in his chest, that weird Eldrazi art. That's really cool. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's it. This list, like I said, was pretty tough to make, pretty subjective. I feel like the last 5 are pretty. I think those are pretty much what most people will consider would be the best creatures. Maybe not in this order, although I think the order I have them in is pretty good, although they're pretty close. There's a lot of really good creatures. You know, look at Ravenous Baloth, which is so great back in the day. Especially when it first came out, that was so big against all the red decks, gained you life and stuff. But I mean, obviously it just hasn't aged very well. Doesn't really see that much play all over the place. So, but it's sweet. It's pretty fun. But yeah, so that's it, guys. That's it. That's all I got for today. I think I'll be working on the top five 5 mana ones, 5 drops, and then top 6 drops, and maybe even go up to 7 and 8. Those ones might be kind of sparse, but that's okay. That's okay. So thanks for stopping by, guys, and have a great day.